Hello, and welcome back to Quarks and Quarter Notes. Today, Tyler and I will be talking about astrology and the nature of personal experience. We get a little stuck on this topic at the end, but I hope it's informative and interesting for you all. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoy the content and leave us some feedback if you have any. So Tyler, is astrology true?
No.
Okay, we're done. See you guys.
That's
No, sorry. Okay. So as always, let's start by maybe defining astrology. What do you think of, Tyler, when I say astrology?
I think of people who think their personality is based on the month they were born.
You're more or less on the right track. More specifically, it is how the positions of the stars and planets at your birth influence your behavior and the natural world in general.
Right. So it's not just the time of year you were born, but like the position of the stars in the sky and the planets.
Right. Yeah. I mean, astrology, we're talking about the stuff that's going on in the sky. Back in the day, astrology was actually the sort of
It's like
beginning.
astronomy.
Yeah. A lot of the...
It's like astrology is to astronomy what alchemy is to chemistry.
Yeah. We sort of... We're looking at the skies and trying to figure out what it means and trying to see what it does to things down here. And that's why people start looking at the stars and building telescopes and so on and so forth.
Right. It makes sense. From at least the Greeks' perspective, I am thinking more Aristotle. The stars, like, they weren't that far away. They were just right up there, and then that's like where the gods lived.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they don't look very far away.
Right.
So, yeah, in its early form, astrology and astronomy were the same, and they started to diverge. When would you say they probably started diverging?
1600s. Whenever Galileo started figuring stuff out about the sky.
Yeah, and so in Galileo did a lot of that sort of looking at the sky and not necessarily seeing what it meant to down here, but just looking up at the sky and seeing what was happening.
Just writing down what he saw.
So today, astrology. That's really. I'm actually really surprised to even feel like I need to talk about this, but I've noticed lately astrology seems to be on the rise. It seems to be a lot more popular, especially here in Austin, where I live.
You're not just noticing it more?
It's possible I might just be older, noticing it more, moving to the city. I mean, astrology wasn't big in, small town Brownwood, Texas. But yeah, here in the city, it's big. You hear everyone talking about the signs. My wife tells me about people at her work talking about their signs. You see people put their signs on their profiles.
Read their horoscope.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how much this has come back. Do you have any thoughts on why there might be this uptick in astrology?
Well, I'm trying to think because I remember my mom always did horoscopes, and I remember a girl in Arizona I used to talk to, and she was like into the whole horoscope stuff. Well, I think part of the problem is we have a lot of science, right? And so it's kind of hard to know exactly what we know. And then we have these people who take some words they've heard and just extrapolate from it. And for instance, like quantum, anytime in a movie something needs explained, it's just quantum, right? It's quantum technology, it's whatever. I think it's the same sort of thing.
Or you think like when Neil deGrasse Tyson or Michio Kaku talks about us being stardust.
Right. They just take that to levels that it shouldn't be.
So you might be blaming a miscommunication from scientists?
No, I think it's They want to take the parts of science that like sound fun and interesting and then like balloon it up. Like right. If does that even make sense?
Yeah, it's a bit into the realm of something like confirmation bias, where we look for things that reinforce our
Yes.
biases and ignore the extra. I think when you're talking about the quantum stuff, it's so
Basic
beyond,
intuition.
yeah, that
Like
our simple minds try to make
right.
sense of it in a way that might not always be scientific.
Right. You can't picture an electron, for instance.
Yeah.
You'd think you'd be able to, because it's just this real tiny thing, but there's no way you can.
Yeah. And when someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson says you are stardust, people who've done really all the work, they know that he's saying, oh, all the elements were made in the stars, and those elements came
Right.
together, and we're made of those atoms, and so we're literally made from what that was what to be. But if you don't do all of that process, you might just hear that and be like, whoa.
Mm-hmm. And it's this fantastical thing. Well, it is pretty cool. Like that is.
Oh,
a
it is
pretty
cool.
fantastic
Well,
thing,
so it's cool and it's not cool, I guess. So it is a cool thing to say, but I don't know. It's also just sort of obvious. It doesn't mean very much, you know?
Well, I mean, I see what you're saying, but that is relatively new knowledge that heavy elements are born of stars.
Oh yeah, it's super cool, and it's a cool thing to say. I guess what I mean is it doesn't have any explanatory power, that statement.
Right. It's not gonna. Yeah, it doesn't mean much about you.
You can't take that statement and use it to explain
Say
anything
anything about you.
Yeah, it's
Right.
it's a conclusion. It's not a starting point for anything. But anyway, so if you guys can't tell, me and Tyler are both quite skeptical about astrology, and I'd like to talk about our specific objections and problems with it. But first, we would like to go ahead and steelman astrology. So we are going to try to not strawman. We are going to build the strongest version of this argument that we can. So we're going to go through some reasons people believe in astrology. I've gotten these from people who I know, and also some I don't know, who believe in astrology and read their horoscopes and stuff. And we'll talk about them. We'll try to give the best parts of them, and then we'll talk about some problems we might have. So put on your astrology hat, or maybe I'll more or less be presenting these to you, Tyler. Maybe tell me, hold your objections for a bit, but just tell me the valid or interesting things maybe that come to mind.
Okay. Let's try it.
Okay, so point one, things which are far away or invisible can have an effect on things here. So the first example, and I've heard this directly from someone who sort of believes in astrology, is the moon pulling tides, for example.
The moon pulling tides. So you said two things. Things which are far away can have an effect, and then things which are invisible can have an effect. Invisible meaning
It's not obvious in our everyday life. So maybe something like germs make us sick. We never see germs. We don't
right.
we don't know what they look like. We don't know when they're there, when they're not there, but they have this massive impact on our day-to-day life.
Well, I mean, those are both just true statements.
Well, so the moon pulls the tide. So the moon is a celestial object.
Right.
So it has some kind of effect on our natural world.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps as a physicist, could you explain what the moon's doing?
Well, the moon is essentially just tugging on the water. And so on the side of Earth where moon is at, there's like a bulge of water where the moon is kind of tugged at it.
Mm-hmm.
And then as the moon kind of goes over the ocean and then next to like a landmass, that bulge of water will go into that landmass, and that's what we see as tides.
So gravity from celestial objects can have an effect on our world. The moon pulls the water.
Without gravity, we wouldn't be in a solar system.
Yeah, well, so it's really obvious how the Earth's gravity affects us. It's constantly pulling us down. It's a little less obvious how gravity from faraway objects affect us.
You see, it doesn't, from my view, it doesn't affect like us at like you or I as individuals. It's acting on like the whole Earth equally.
True, but you see the tides come up. You see, and we know the moon is the object responsible for that. So it's not like it's just pulling the whole Earth up.
And a little bit the sun.
Yeah.
But
so the moon's pulling on you and I as well, as much as it's pulling up on the tides.
Whenever the moon's directly above you, you're a little bit lighter. If the moon is like underneath us from our perspective, we're going to be a little bit heavier because it'll be like pulling down.
And would you say it's possible that that could have some kind of effect on your personality, for example, like being a little bit lighter when the moon's over you, maybe?
I want to say no. Because I know it'll be, first of all, it'll be a tiny amount, and personality is like in the brain, and your brain's not affected by slight changes in gravity.
Well, so we can get into the really specific problems with that, but in principle, it is technically possible, right, that your personality could be affected by a small change in gravity like that, right?
Is it?
I don't see why it's not possible. It's certainly logically possible.
So this is what's going through my mind. Us and our brain were made of atoms, which are the strong and weak nuclear force and electromagnetism. Those things, the strength of the force of electromagnetism, which is mostly our brain, just electrons and stuff flowing through, the strength of that is something like 10 to the 30 times stronger than gravity, which means that if I have stuff that's like here, if I have a bit of gravity over here pulling on it or over here, I can't even imagine that this would really know.
I mean, when we're talking about something as close as the moon,
right?
It would know a little bit, right?
Like maybe, like sure,
when
like
it's right overhead.
For sure, it's having an effect on you, like, and your energy and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, that's for sure happening. It have an effect on your personality. That seems... I mean, I can grant it.
Well, it's... So, we can get, again, to the problems with trying to say that this has a change that we can predict or anything like that. But it's at least possible. There's some sort of causational ability.
There is interaction happening.
There's okay, yeah. So, for example, you take 1,000 people, you ask them a question, and then you take another 1,000 people and you ask them the question, but this time you put a warm cup in their hand. They answer the questions differently. It's clear that external things can affect our choices.
Sure.
And it is an example of some sort of celestial object making some sort of change. We can, again, talk about the problems, but at least in principle, it's possible.
Right. Well, we have for close objects too.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, we're talking about the moon.
We could talk about this. We could talk about this later.
Yeah. Objections later, but at least objection. That's like one sort of mechanism people think about. Another that's gravity. Something else is light and radiation. So, does radiation from stars have any kind of effect on our world?
Yes.
How?
Well, I don't want to say radiation from stars, but just like general radiation
from the sun.
that's
let's talk
just
about the
in
sun.
Space. Or just like cosmic rays are everywhere, right? And the sun is like a definitely huge contributor to most of the cosmic rays that we see.
Mm-hmm.
But they 100% affect our computers on a daily basis.
Yeah.
We have to constantly correct for bit changes and things of that sorts. It can affect weather, so in that sort of sense, it has a direct effect on our experience. As for it affecting like cosmic rays hitting me,
Well, we can get to objections,
wouldn't-
but so
right?
first of all, does the position of stars, can stars in different positions bombard us with different cosmic rays? So like, for example, if a star is in one place, is it possible we get a different sort of amounts of radiation and different rays?
For any star that's not the sun,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of energy making it to Earth is minuscule.
Yeah, but we get some amount of energy from other stars that.
Well, that's how we see them.
Right.
Right.
And this energy can at least affect our computers.
Not the photons.
Not the light itself.
Not the light.
But radiation coming from the stars.
It'd be hard to say like what star any particular cosmic ray comes from unless it's the sun.
Yeah.
The sun's pretty obvious. Any other cosmic ray, I'm unsure if we would be able to know where it came from.
Yeah. I understand that as a problem and such, but just like again, just
but
in
there
principle.
are cosmic rays that are not from the sun that are definitely hitting Earth. That's for sure.
And having some kind of causal impact.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I said, it could change like the weather, for instance.
Yeah.
To a small degree, but I mean.
Yeah, so celestial objects can affect our world with gravity and with radiation at the very least. And the different positions of these objects, like you said, the moon overhead, that can affect things, and different positions of stars can affect things. So we sort of have the baseline for a sort of belief in that maybe celestial objects can affect us. Right. Like these are reasons.
These are reasons.
Okay. Let me give you some more reasons. This is actual science. So we have statistical facts. We have many, many case studies done on these. I'll link a few in the description. I put one down here in case you want to check. But in summary, there are differences between people born in different months. Now, again, we're not talking about star positions right now, but those who are born in autumn, that is October through November, have a much higher likelihood to have food allergies. While those born in the spring and summer, March to August, are more likely to have a positive outlook on life. So you have actual predictive power when you know the month someone is born in predicting things about their personality and things about their general health.
General health?
Yeah, so like allergies, for example. So like milk. If you're allergic to milk and eggs, you're more likely to have been born in autumn.
I see. Those sound like seasonal things.
Yeah. Again, objections and stuff. But so we start with, celestial objects can have an impact on our life. It seems that people born at different times have differences that we can predict with science.
Sure. So like being born at different times, you have consistent
traits. So like someone born in spring or summer is just more likely to have a positive outlook on life than someone born in winter. And this is substantiated by quite large studies.
Right. Well, that's pretty easy.
Yeah. Okay, and then lastly we have personal experience. I think this is the one. So those first two are easy to talk about in scientific terms. This one is a little bit trickier because we're in the realm of people's personal experiences with this stuff. So you have people who say, I was able to predict this using astrology. Every person who I meet with this sign is this way. I knew this person was going to do this thing because of their sign. So like they read their horoscopes, they do the work, they make a prediction, and then it happens.
Right.
And that could be quite compelling.
It can be. It's
So,
like I'm thinking of the somebody says something and then the astrologer is just like, "Oh, of course you would say that. You're a Leo."
yeah. So I want to start just by granting all of that. Let's just say that because of these things, because we know the moon pulls the tides, we know that solar radiation can affect things, people born in different times have predictable traits, and people are able to make some amount of predictions using astrology. Let's just say that it's true for the sake of argument. And we'll talk about all our problems, but what problems do you see with astrology, granted everything is true and that astrology works?
Well, when it comes to like rays and stuff, the unknowability of where they definitely originate from.
Well, okay, so that's an objection to the sort of premise of astrology. But if we just accept that it's true, accept that we
Well,
can
so
figure
we're
this stuff out.
saying so they're trying to say that we know some stuff about the sky and we know how the orientation of the sky whenever I was born
Well,
or
I
something
want you
like
to just
that.
imagine that the astrologers are right. We get proof tomorrow that astrology works. All the astrologers have been right all along. Can you think of any problems with astrology, even if it does work?
I mean, granting that it does work, then no. Like if it works, right?
I think it has a few problems. The first one I can think of is it reinforces some really bad prejudices and stereotypes. So, to use an analogy, people are born when they're born. They don't have any power or choice over that. In a lot of the ways that people who are born certain races have no choice over that. And we can take people of different races and we can gather data and make predictions based on their race alone. And we can prejudge them based on that. And I don't think that's conducive to a successful society, I guess. So you can say that, okay, all the Leos are this way, but putting out horoscopes with that knowledge, even if you grant that it's all perfectly true, is it reinforces the worst sorts of our behavior in a really bad way, I think. So if you take,
It's tribal.
yeah. So even if it were true, it would be something that you'd want to be able to honestly talk about, but you wouldn't want to put it in your profiles. You wouldn't want to write daily horoscopes and distribute
I
them.
mean, philosophically speaking, it it takes away our freedom, right? Like
Yeah.
I was born in July, I'm a Leo, and so I'm predestined in a sense to have whatever personality Leos are supposed to have.
Yeah, and this could, some people might see this as a problem, but that is something worthy of thinking about. If you are into astrology and you grant that, and you believe that it's true, you are in some sense committed to determinism. You might not have a problem with that, but some people who are astrologists might not consider themselves determinists, but you are sort of committed, I think, if you believe
Right.
the celestial
Well,
objects have this effect.
I mean, I'm more or less a determinist, but it seems like this is a more philosophical point,
Yeah.
like I said. But
Well, I bet there are a lot of
if we
astrologists
have,
out there who aren't.
if like
But they
if we
should.
have a doctrine that just like I don't know how to say it. It's just like
Well, it's like if these if these objects, huge objects, but if these objects that are so far
right,
away and have such
right.
tiny effects on us can influence our behavior in predictable ways,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing we could conceivably have control of. Because the things that are close to us and have really noticeable effects would be some of the biggest impacts on us. And
Right. Which is all true to a sense.
well,
Like,
yeah, it's not a huge problem. A lot of people believe that we are more or less just cue balls being hit. But I don't think a lot of astrologers think this way, but they really should if they're committed to it. And I think it's worth mentioning for sure.
yeah. Well, it's just, in my mind, to not have a choice sucks. Right? Like,
Yeah.
why must I be this way just because I'm a Leo?
Yeah,
Or
just because
whatever.
the stars were in this position when I was born.
Right.
But to make the point on the bad stereotypes, the tribalism sort of thing, imagine if you will. So black males commit more violent crimes. Statistically, when you account for everything, they commit more violent
They're
crimes.
arrested more
Yeah,
for violent crimes.
you can talk about some problems with the data, but that it's just a fact. And if you take that fact and you put out a horoscope telling, okay, white people, be sure to understand your privilege today, and everything's going to go well for you. Black people, be sure that you don't go commit any crimes because it's in your nature. Blah, 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 blah. Could you imagine, like,
No.
that is
It would
what
be so
horoscopes are
horrible.
doing.
Well, worse than that, they're giving straight nonsense, like actual nonsense that blanket statements like you want to be a happy person or something like that. Like
Yeah.
super general things that you can put, like you can swap horoscopes and I guarantee you none of the astrologers would notice.
Yeah. Okay, well let's talk about our specific problems with different points. But yeah, even if it were true, I think it would be very problematic.
Right.
So, yeah, like you said, you could switch horoscopes and it wouldn't make a difference. Many studies have been done on this. It's never better than chance. Sometimes, for the most part, it's not better than chance, and the times that it is better than chance have very reasonable explanations.
Right.
So let's start with the argument that things that are invisible can have effects here. You already sort of touched on this, but so the moon pulls the tides.
Right.
And you already touched on how it's such a small effect that it's hard to see what effect it might have. So even if it did have an
Right.
effect,
Gravity is just a really weak force.
yeah, there's no way we could
overall.
measure that or predict it in any
Not
real
really.
sense.
My other objection is stars are really far away. So, for instance, a star, so I'm 25 years old. So, a star that is 26 light years away has had no interaction with me since I was born.
I don't even think is there a star 25 light years away? I don't know.
Oh, yeah, there's stars
Okay.
billions of light years away.
Yeah, I know they're billion. Like, what's how
The closest star is 4
Okay.
light years.
Yeah, so yeah, that's the other point, is that even the closest star, if you take the gravitational impact it has
The
on us.
closest star, in order for it to interact with a kid who's born, that interaction takes 4 years.
Yeah.
So like you're born, and then 4 years later, you're finally interacting with Alpha Centauri. Like,
And then what would the gravity impact from Alpha Centauri, the closest star,
negligible.
compared to the moon?
If
Like-
we dumped literally all of our money into building a detector, we wouldn't be able to detect it. Like it's such a teeny tiny amount.
No.
Alpha Centauri is a star. Well, it's a star system actually, but very, very, very far away, and gravity falls off like the square of the distance. So 1 over the square of the distance. So pretty quickly.
And at the distance it is from us, even the position of the stars, it would matter even less. whether the star's here or there, the difference in the gravitational effect on you is just...
No. At that point, you have to like zoom way out and then kind of look at the system of the galaxy as a whole.
Yeah.
And then in that context, that's when it starts making sense.
Yeah. So the gravity is pretty problematic. It's hard to tell what kind of effect it could even have on us.
But not just gravity, but like causal interaction.
Yeah, so like the radiation, for example.
Right. And then even slower moving like cosmic rays.
So if people wanted to maybe if they wanted to try to update their astrological predictions, maybe they should delay everything by the amount of light years each star is away or something like that.
Right. Well, the problem with doing that is there are many more stars that are more than 100 light years away than are within 100 light years, right?
Yeah, so
But I guess I'll be fair. So the Milky Way is, I want to say, 150,000 light years across. So, yeah, the number of stars that we can see, those are they're so far away. They're so far away.
In the solar radiation, it can flip the bits in the computers. Could it flip bits in our brain?
I don't think so, because I don't think our brain uses bits like in that same kind of way.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm pretty sure of that. Like, right?
Well,
we don't have like...
You could sort of look at synapses as bits of sorts.
I don't think so. They're really complicated things.
Oh yeah, and even if solar radiation
there's like charge being stored up and stuff, and like potential levels that could be broken. So like in principle, I could see a cosmic ray like hitting
a synapse
or going past a neuron or something, and it like the charge from that forces a bit of charge to like collect at one part of the thing, and then it fires.
Right.
But like, sure.
So it's possible. Again, it's possible in principle, but it's a big.
But that interaction, it'll be negligible though. Like our brain has error code, like error correction. Yeah.
No, but even outside of that, to say that it's possible in principle, it's a big jump to go to. Therefore, the position of the stars is a way we can predict human behavior, because it would have such a small impact, and the position of the star in the sky.
Well, so because it has such a small impact, I'm not even sure if it's possible in principle.
There actually might be a problem, but I think even if you grant that it's possible,
well, we would have to say, so first of all, it's pretty unlikely that a cosmic ray is going to cause
a personality
synapse to
change.
fire.
Yeah.
Or a synapse to fire.
Sure.
Just like a single electrical imbalance to happen. First of all, it's unlikely for that to happen, and then the astrologers are assuming that's going to happen to babies the moment they're born or something like that. So
in a consistent way based on the position of the star.
Consistently over and over. Like, it's already an unlikely thing to happen, and they're postulating that it happens every birth.
So like every baby on the Earth, when the star is in this point, gets a cosmic ray that fires a synapse in a similar way. Right. It's too much. In principle,
like based on physics alone, that's just false. Like so statistically unlikely.
If things like that were happening, we would know about it, because there would be very obvious implications in our technology.
Right. Well, what would happen is all the babies born in July would be the exact same, and then all the babies born in August.
Well, that sort of is the claim of the astrologer, right?
Right. But all we have to do is find two people who were born in the same hospital.
Well, okay.
And show that they have different personalities.
So I have been reading a lot into this in preparation, and people tend to explain that with other celestial bodies. So they'll say like, oh, you were born at this moment and you were this way, but this planet had gone over here by this point in time, and so it had a different effect on you, and you have to take the whole picture into consideration. So they do have ways sort of around this kind of thing. And the basic claim is that no two people are born at the exact same moment.
Okay, but like, sure, that's true. But then they're...
Well, and my other problem with this is that
they're like going back on their claim that... So like, let's take a Leo and a Cancer... completely different personality types is what they're claiming.
Yeah.
If I take two babies that were born within the same minute, they're obviously going to be the same sign.
Yeah.
But if they grow up and one is like
really different,
a super extroverted, like just like crazy, I don't know, does a bunch of stuff, and then like you have this introverted guy, like completely different, opposite. Like how do they explain that?
Well, they would just say that in that minute the difference of the position in one or two of these really important celestial bodies had a big impact. They do have dancing games.
Well, that's the problem. Like then what happened to your prediction? Like they're both Leos. Like what happened to the Leo predictive power?
To Steelman them, and of course this is nonsense, but the more refined astrologers, they don't accept that just purely the month is all you need. If you want accurate predictions, you have to know everything about the moment you were born, the position of all the important stars and constellations and planets, and so on and so forth. So they'll talk about being a Leo, but at the moment you were born, Mars was in this position, and because Mars is, the god of war, you're a little bit more aggressive than the normal Pisces or whatever.
Another objection. It seems awfully arrogant to assume that you can know all you need to know to figure out a person.
Well, I don't think they assume that. They just assume they can get enough information to make reasonable predictions. I don't think they can claim anything absolute. Yeah, there are good objections to this stuff, but I don't know if that one is necessarily the best one, because they do have explanations that are founded on fallacious thinking. But they have thought the stuff through. It isn't brain dead.
All scientists have error bars in their data, right? They don't seem to.
The sophisticated ones do. They tend to leave room for like, oh, this might be right, this might be wrong. But their basic claim is that they'll do better than chance with what they have.
Right. And I've also seen studies for class. They don't really have predictive power.
No, they don't.
They brought in astrologers, and they brought in, I forgot what fields it was, like astronomy, and then like just random people. And the astrologers, there was one study in which the astrologers were like above chance.
Yeah.
But like that can be accounted for
sure
purely by statistical fluctuation, like more or less.
That, and there are other ways you can account
like
for it.
Like they're gonna get lucky if you ask them enough times, they're gonna get lucky and answer correctly once, right?
Well, yeah, but there are other ways. So let's talk about that. The statistics. So people born in different months do have different traits. So for example, if you know someone's allergic to milk and eggs, you could guess they're born in autumn. Now, knowing these sorts of things can give you extra predictive power when you're an astrologer, for example. If you ask someone if they have a positive outlook on life, you're more likely to be right, and you can do better than chance saying that, oh, they were born in spring or summer.
Right. So like,
So let's talk about objections to this one.
well, this is going back to the paper I read. And the paper I read was what do they call it? Like a meta study where they studied several different studies of this thing. In one of them, they gave the astrologers the star maps, the planet maps, all the stuff they asked for in order to make predictions, and said like, that's what we know about this person. What can you tell us, right?
Yeah.
And they were never able to like make any definitive statements about the person's personality or how they should be or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So perhaps there's something more important to these sorts of predictions based on people's birth dates than the position of the stars and planets. What are some? What,
I would say
what
it
would
has
you hypothesize?
Genetics.
Well, your genetics wouldn't necessarily be different just because you're born in a different month, right?
Well, no, but I think those are the things that have effect on your personality.
Oh, okay. Well, so like I said,
I don't
people
think star positions do.
But people born from March to August are more likely to have a positive outlook on life. I would call that a personality prediction.
Like by how much?
Quite a double or triple. Like it's like 5% to 10 or 15% different. It's over a big number. You can reasonably predict.
So we would be able to account for...
This is accounting for a lot of factors. I can even I'll link you the study, but it checks out.
So surely there are like correlations between like if you're born in the winter versus being born in the summer, like
there are differences. Now, yeah. So notice how you're saying winter and summer.
Like, do what?
Well, notice how you're saying winter and summer. You're not saying born when Mars was here and Alpha Centauri was here. The more relevant thing that has an impact are the seasons.
yeah, exactly. That makes sense to me. To be like a baby. So like, I bet people who are born in extremely cold environments, say Russia, tend to have slightly different personality types than those born on the equator.
Certainly.
I don't know if the data's out there on that, but that would be my guess.
Yeah. They're probably more different than the difference between someone born when Mars was on the opposite side of the other, you know?
Right. Well, yeah.
I would make that prediction.
Can confirm.
So, yeah. I think to say that people born in autumn are more likely to be allergic to milk and eggs, it has to do with the sorts of things that are in the air in autumn because of the season, not necessarily because of the position of the stars and planets. So it is possible, again, in principle, that our environment can have these sorts of impacts on our personality, but they're just things that impact us.
Our immediate environment.
Yeah. Things that have a lot more causal power than a star that is many, many, many miles away.
Right. Well, like I said, like, you cannot have causal interaction with the star until you've waited however many years it is light years away.
Yeah.
And
even then, you're only interacting with, like, radiation and light.
Well, so you'll wait 4 years to interact with the Alpha Centauri star system. You're going to have to wait another year to interact with the next furthest star. And then, like, by the time you're 40, you've interacted with, I don't know, 50 stars, 100 stars or something like that. You've not even gotten close to the number of stars that are in the sky at the moment you were born.
Right.
So, like, immediate environment that's close to us for sure has impact on us. That makes sense.
So let's talk about the third one. This is sort of the trickier one to necessarily debunk with science alone. I think rationality is the best way, but personal experience. So For example, I was looking on the astrology subreddit, and I was looking at reasons people think astrology is true, and this person was like, I was able to predict these things about these two boyfriends I had, and I was absolutely right. People can tell me it's BS, but it works. What what do you say to someone like that?
I don't know. Because, like, so let's assume that the horoscopes, by chance, were correct in predicting the personality of her two boyfriends.
Right.
Like, from her perspective, that's pretty
Evidence.
overwhelming, right?
Right.
Right. I mean, the only way to convince, I don't know, have conversation like these, try and point out.
Well, you can refute the other things, but how do you refute the personal experience?
I mean, you can't refute the personal experience. I would just say, like, don't, just be wary of confirmation bias.
That's really hard. I mean, all of us
it's really hard, but, like, you can try, right? Like, I mean, I tried.
I mean, it's so difficult. I remember the other day I read something and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then I thought of maybe an exception to that. I was like, is there an exception? And I looked up and I found an exception to the thing I had just read. And I was like, well, maybe it still works, but something else is. So, and I caught myself right there. I was like,
right.
I'm dismissing this counter evidence to the thing I just read.
Right.
Ding, ding, ding. And that's really hard. It was, in the moment, I recognized it, but I still, like, I didn't want to. I wanted to just ignore it. It was amazing.
It's very strange.
I think the problem is with using personal experience at all. I think personal experience is just not a valid form of evidence for anything except the experience itself.
I see what you're saying. However, I do want to point out, in my critical thinking class that I took a few semesters back, when we were talking about, well, whenever you think critically, the things you should believe, or how do I say this? You should trust your intuition first before you don't trust it. Because, like, that's most of what you've got.
But our intuitions are wrong so often.
Right, but they're correct quite often as well. That's why we have them. Like, they're useful.
No. A lot of our intuitions, we don't have them because they help us get it correct. In fact, a lot of our intuitions are built specifically to get things wrong.
Because they're useful.
Yeah. Like we talked about this in the other podcast, but the idea, when you hear a rustling, you have an intuition that there's something or someone there. That's an intuition that's built on false positives, because the cost of getting that wrong is fatal, but the cost of getting it right is fatal. So, like, if you don't imagine there's a person and there is a person, you could die. But the cost of thinking there's a person and there's not a person there, that's not a cost. So, like, that's an intuition that's built not to get right, but to survive.
Right, but, like, we build intuitions up.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
So whenever I'm tutoring calculus or something, and it's a pretty tricky problem, I'm gonna follow my intuition to figure it out, right? Like, that's...
Yeah.
And I think you should do that, right? And especially for those intuitions that you have built up.
I see what you're saying, and in the moment, yes, of course, trust your intuitions. But anytime you're unpacking something and analyzing it, I think you should question every intuition you have. I think you shouldn't take anything for granted, because it is so easy to get these things wrong.
Right. Well, it's... Right.
In the moment, you should just trust yourself, because when you're trying to make an important decision or you're trying to do something, just fighting with yourself isn't going to help anything. But when you're like sitting here trying to convince somebody and unpack something, like you have to throw, I think, everything personal out the window, because we just get this stuff wrong.
Well, intuitions don't seem. It seems like we have a different idea of intuition.
Intuition might not be the right word. I'm talking specifically about personal experience to justify things. So like this person who used astrology to predict
and
two
personal
things.
experience. Okay, so this is getting me to my next point. Personal experience is like the second thing you should go to whenever you're looking to. If you're told something, you match it to your personal experience to see whether it makes sense or not, right?
No. I completely disagree. Personal experience is a horrible. We're so good at fooling ourselves and misunderstanding or misseeing or misremembering.
I just think you're not giving us enough credit.
I mean, how many times have you thought you knew something or thought you remembered something and you're wrong?
Right. I mean,
countless
all
times.
The time,
yeah.
Every day.
So
every day.
You should
but
never.
Like I go to class every day, and then I use these intuitions of mathematics that I've built up over the years and intuitions of physics that I've been trying to build up. Those all came from like my experience of like going to school, and I trust those.
Yeah, I of course you have to, but whenever your experience goes against the statistical facts, the experience of everyone else, all this other stuff, it is subservient to it. It cannot override. You don't go to it first or second. You go to it last, I think.
That seems strange to me. Because like all you have access to, first of all, is experience.
Okay, if I like saw my cup on my desk start to float in the air, and spin around, and then it landed back on my desk, I'd be very weirded out.
As you should.
But based on the things that I know to be true from physics, from research, from studies, from other people's experiences conglomerated, I would conclude that there was something fishy going on with my personal experience. I would not trust it. I wouldn't say that something weird went out there and I know it because I experienced it. No, because my experience is fallible.
But like in a sense you did. It can't be though. If that's what you saw, that is what you saw.
Yeah, and it's proof that I experienced that thing, but it's not proof that that thing happened.
I mean, does it?
No.
It exists. It was in the world for a second in your brain.
I know a guy who took LSD and he saw a strawberry become a superhero, and it was super strawberry and it was flying around. That's not evidence for there being a super strawberry.
Right.
Yeah, because personal experience is easily manipulated and very fallible. So it should never be the basis.
It's like it's not like fallible. Experience just is.
Yeah, experience just
like
is.
It can't be. Experience cannot be wrong.
It can't be wrong in reference to the experience, but it can be wrong with what is happening in the outside world, outside of your experience.
As far as other people are saying.
Right.
And you're gonna... I don't get it.
I think the experience should always bow.
That seems strange to me.
Really? So like...
Right. I tend to trust my professors because they've had more experience than I, or any of the other students around me.
So if you saw, like, if you had a strawberry in front of you right now and it grew a cape and muscles and started flying around and stuff, you would think, and then it stopped and then everything went back to normal. You would think that actually happened and that there was actually a strawberry that grew a cape and flew around, and that actually happened outside of your experience.
Well, it happened in my mind.
Right. Of course.
Right.
Of course it happened in your mind.
Yeah.
But it would be completely unreasonable to say that it actually happened.
Would it?
Outside of your mind. Yes.
If I saw it,
It
I would
violates...
say, hey guys. I would say, hey guys, this sounds insane, but this is what I saw.
And I would say, that is
flying
crazy,
strawberry.
Tyler. You were probably just
Yep.
seeing things. Here, let me come take a look. And I would go look. And if I didn't see it, I'd be like, yeah, there's probably something going on in your head.
And then...
And that's the end of it.
What's wrong with me saying, but what you're seeing is just in your head? Like...
Well, you don't...
Just because what you're seeing isn't true, like, right? Because...
Okay, then I would get a third person to come in. And then they would see what I see.
Right.
And then I would show you, hey,
I still don't get it. I still don't get it.
And then I could break down the DNA of the strawberry, and I could show you, look, Tyler, there's nothing in here that codes for capes or flying abilities. It is just a fruit, and it doesn't fly around. In fact, it flying around would violate all the laws of physics as we know them. So there's clearly something going on in your mind that wasn't happening in the outside world.
My mind was making a representation of something that wasn't happening.
Yeah. And if you trusted your personal experience over this like overwhelming evidence, I would start to mistrust you.
Right. But I trust my experience on a daily.
Of course.
Like, I have to.
You have to. But when you're like analyzing your beliefs and trying to figure out what is true, I feel like it is always the subservient to
but
these
like
other
so
things.
So I'm trying to get to, when you're analyzing your beliefs, you're doing it through experience. You're doing it through what you remember, through what you remember reading or seeing or hearing somebody. This is all experience.
Yeah, of course.
And you're like cherry picking like what you want to pick, no matter what it is.
No, well, you don't have to cherry pick. You follow you have to make some basic assumptions. You're right. Like, you do have to assume other people are conscious and acting in the world, and you have to assume that logic works.
I have to assume that my experience works. Like, it gets me through the world. It's a somewhat accurate representation of what is actually happening. That's why I'm able to function in the world.
Yeah. Yes, and also that it can sometimes be wrong.
So I'm always constantly aware of that, sure.
Yeah.
But like I said, whenever I'm doing like my math homework or my physics homework, or I'm trying to tutor somebody,
of course,
I go straight to my intuition.
Yes. But
which is built on my experience.
But when you go back and you try to analyze how you could maybe make your math better, you should start by trying to find those places where your personal experience has failed. And you find that by measuring up your personal experience by the experiences of others and by the data.
Yeah, the data is important.
And by that measure, anytime you're analyzing a belief, the data and the experiences of others...
Well, the experience is part of the data.
Like, but it's a tiny part of the data, because we have to acknowledge that at any point it could be wrong.
Right, well, any of the data could be wrong.
Sure. But my only point is that our minds are more likely to get it wrong than the data because of our built-in biases. And
I don't think that's true.
Confirmation bias, for example. How else do you get away from things like confirmation bias and...
Well, I don't think you can, like 100%.
But how do you fight it if you just perfectly trust your personal experience all the time and say it's the thing you go to?
I don't say I perfectly trust
it.
But
you said it's the most important part of it. So how...
Well, right. So whenever you're thinking about whether something is true or not, you should look at your experience.
You should look for where it's wrong.
If you told me, you saw a floating apple, I would look at my experience. I would say I've never seen a floating apple. That seems unlikely. I wouldn't say my immediate instinct isn't to go to my understanding of physics or my understanding of the laws of nature or anything like that. My immediate instinct is to go to what I've experienced. I've never seen a floating apple, and on that's why I disagree.
But no,
And then
no.
then I'll start looking at the other data points.
Even if you haven't seen a flying apple, if you knew that physics allowed for it to happen, you wouldn't doubt my claim as much. In fact, you might just grant it because you're like, oh yeah, that can happen.
Well,
because physics says that can happen.
right, but
Not because you've experienced it.
I would first try and remember the time I've seen a floating apple. That would be the easiest way for me to confirm what you're saying is true or not if I've had the same experience.
But your experience should still be subservient to the laws of physics. So like if you know, so if you haven't experienced it, and
if the laws allow for a floating apple, then we probably see floating apples here and there.
No, let's just say you haven't. The laws of physics allow for lots of things we haven't seen before.
Sure. Well, so if you say you saw an alien spaceship,
Yeah,
the laws of physics allow for that.
sure.
I would go to my experience. I've never seen a UFO. That seems kind of crazy.
You wouldn't believe me?
Well, initially I wouldn't believe you, right? Because I personally have not seen it.
Well, even if I was
And
being
that's-
like extremely earnest and detailed, like you
It
would
goes counter to my experience, yes. That's what I would say. Because in my experience, I've never seen a UFO, so that seems kind of crazy. And only then do I start looking at what does science have to say about this, right? And then I can like change perhaps my expectations.
But how
of
can
what's
you
true.
change if it's always subservient to your personal experience?
Well, reading the data is part of my personal experience.
I think we're just looking at personal experience differently. I'm not talking
Yeah,
about
there's a disconnect
experience
here.
as a whole. I'm talking about, when I say personal experience, I'm talking about an experience only you have, as far as you can tell.
That's my experience.
Well,
Only I am having this particular experience that I'm having right now.
yeah, but like if you and I are looking at an apple and it starts floating and we both see it floating, that's not
Right.
a personal experience. But if only you see it floating and I don't, then it's a personal experience.
So if we're sitting in the same room,
Yeah.
and well, yes, exactly. You're making my point. So if we're sitting in the same room, we're looking at an empty table. I see an apple appear and it starts floating. You're going to immediately compare that to what you're experiencing right there and disagree with me.
Yeah, I'll say no, there's nothing on the table.
You're not gonna disagree with me based on physics or any of that sort. You're gonna disagree on me because you are not experiencing that.
Yeah, and then we're like, okay, well, our experiences are fallible, so let's find some other method of figuring this out.
Right, but do you get my point? Like, the experience is the first thing you go to.
I guess I get what you mean, that it's like the first thing we jump to, but
Right.
it's not the most important or the most reliable thing. It's the thing, yeah, we instinctively jump to it first, but we should always bury it in the face of opposing other points of information. So like if you see the apple floating and appear and I don't see anything, the first thing I'm gonna do is call someone else in the room. I'll be like, Caitlin, come in here. Do you see anything on the table? And if she doesn't see anything on the table, then I'm gonna think there's something wrong with you. Or if she does, then I'm gonna think you're both on drugs. No, if she does, then I'm gonna think there's something wrong with me because our individual personal experiences are fallible. It's better to trust the group rather than the individual in this circumstance. And then after that, if we're still doubtful, we can dive even deeper into like the...
We're a little bit like talking about like a specific situation in which you should probably not trust your experience, but like I still think overall probably even overwhelmingly, you should trust your experience and you should trust your intuitions.
I don't agree, and I think this is the exact problem with convincing people out of astrology, because I think more people think the way you think, and there's just no way to convince somebody out of that when they have this experience of astrology working.
Right, but and
it can't be undermined.
That's slightly different. To say, I saw a prediction of my boyfriend and the prediction came true, and that happened actually not once but twice. That she had the experience of reading some words and then making a schema of her boyfriend and then comparing that to her actual boyfriend, and it was close or accurate enough that it convinced her.
Yeah.
Right. There's nothing in that experience that is like personal or fantastical. Like whenever we see an apple floating, that is a fantastical experience that's quite unusual and kind of hard to justify, right?
Yeah.
But like
extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
So we go to this girl and we say, sure, this happened not once but twice, but like if we present her with all the other people who tried to the prediction but got it wrong, and we told her you just got lucky, like that is now part of her experience that she should incorporate into deciding whether or not astrology is true.
Well, it's part of her experience as a technicality, but it's nothing I would call personal experience.
I would say something like, so I could say to her, your predictions were lucky, right? And that's a valid experience. In the example of I'm experiencing a floating apple and you're not, you can't say I'm luckily predicting that's a completely different thing that's happening, right?
Yeah, it's not a good analogy for a situation. It's just a way of talking about the problems with using personal experience to justify beliefs. That's the only connection.
But I think you should. That's what you have is personal experience.
You have experience.
You don't have anything else.
But you have experiences that seem to exist outside of your own personal self. There seems to be things that are happening that aren't just what's happening in your head. When I talk about personal experience, I'm talking about the things that you witness yourself, the things going on in your head, and things that you experience that other people don't confirm. I heard a voice in my head and it told me to do this. That's a personal experience. I saw this happen. No one else saw it. It was just me. That's personal.
Well, anytime I'm having a conversation with myself, that's just all in my head.
But
you can't confirm that.
Yeah, I can't. So it's a personal experience for you. But this conversation, I wouldn't consider a personal experience in the sense that I'm using it, because I can confirm to other people that it happened if they doubt your claim. So that's what I mean when I say personal experience. I don't mean experience.
You should trust your experience.
You should trust your experience.
Because that's all you have.
But this category of experience, the personal type that only happens in your head and isn't verified by other people around you, this type of experience I think you should be a lot more skeptical of.
So when I'm talking to myself, trying to make my schedule for the day or the week, I know nobody else is having that conversation that I'm having with myself.
Yeah.
Should I be skeptical of the conversation the dialogue that's happening in my head?
If you have a reason,
that seems to be absolutely true to me that it's happening.
Well, if you go, so this is a interesting one to use because it's not one that anyone would call you out about. But yeah, so the next day, if you said, "Oh, yesterday I went through my head and I did da 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 da," I think it's reasonable to think that you might be wrong about that. Maybe you didn't. Yesterday, maybe you didn't do that thing that you thought you did in your head. Yeah, because
How is that possible?
Because our memories are very fallible. Our brains are constantly patching together new memories, and
Sure.
you might be misremembering. Maybe you didn't think. Maybe you thought of something else slightly differently, or maybe you thought of that, but you didn't go on this trail of thought. But now, when you're remembering it, you're thinking that you did. You should be somewhat skeptical, especially and when you have a reason to. So, like, I remember setting an alarm for yesterday. Yesterday, I remember setting my alarm for this morning. My alarm didn't go off, but I remember doing that. So the phone messed up.
Right. And so what you say is, I must not have.
Yeah, you should be distrustful of that experience that only happened in your head.
No. You're trustful of your immediate experience that is saying the alarm is actually not set.
Well, I mean the next morning when you wake up and your alarm didn't go off.
Right. So you wake up, you're like, I thought I set my alarm. Why didn't it go off? I look at my phone. The alarm's not set. I must not have set the alarm.
Well, yeah, that's the reasonable thing to do. You doubt that memory you have of setting it. You should be skeptical.
Right, but I don't doubt what's in front of me.
Yeah.
I don't doubt the experience I'm having.
Right. And and the difference is you could show the phone to someone else. You'd be like, look, the alarm's not set. You know? It's because this phone, the evidence that you can see on the phone, this exists outside of your head. But the memory of doing it exists only in your head, and you should therefore be skeptical of it. So that's what I mean by personal experience.
Well, yeah, you should be like, you should question yourself for sure. But like that shouldn't like not overwhelmingly. You should trust what you know. You know some stuff. Like that is true. You do know some stuff. You should trust what you know. So like you had you talked about LSD, right? Or let's say mushrooms. Like we other people have verified the experience that other people had on the substance, right?
Yeah, and you can talk about the experiences honestly, but you can't justify like claims about the physical world with them.
So like 100 different people take mushrooms. They all report. It seems like for any individual, they're going to be hallucinating the reality to some degree. It's going to be altered, right?
They might see things that
real.
aren't actually there.
Right. But then we give it to 100 people and they all report similar experiences.
Yeah.
Like, what do we do then?
What do you mean, what do we do?
Are those experiences no longer personal because we verified it with like other people?
Well, no, because we're not able to really. They aren't the same experience. They're similar experiences, but they're not the same.
Well, I can say that about literally anything that we're like. So you and I on the boat ride.
That was the same experience. We had different perspectives. But the experience
slightly
was the
different
same.
Experience. Not quite, because like
it's the same.
My stomach might have been hurting slightly. I had a bit of a sunburn. You didn't have a sunburn.
Yeah.
I was thinking about other things than you were. The experiences, like the contents of the experience, are definitely.
Yeah, so there was some elements of personal experience within like the broader experience for sure. And those personal elements, those things like your stomach hurting, those are the elements that I would be most skeptical of looking back. I'm sure your stomach did hurt, but it's possible you're misremembering that, and because that's the part that can't be verified by others.
So I'm not trying to say that that's what was happening.
Yeah.
But there were definitely differences in our physiology.
Yeah, for sure. And most of those differences I would push into the realm of personal experience in that they couldn't be confirmed by others. And experiences on
right. But if my
LSD
stomach is hurting,
and psilocybin, those experiences are very heavily personal.
if my stomach is hurting, though, you just looking at me, you can't confirm that. I can
No.
say, hey, my stomach is hurting.
Yeah.
So, like, should I trust myself that my stomach is hurting? Or should I question that because nobody else can confirm it? So maybe my stomach isn't hurting right now.
No,
Sure
well,
feels like it, but maybe it's not.
Again, like we said before, in the moment, you trust your instincts so that you operate in the world effectively. But when you go back and unpack and try to figure out what's true and what's not true, yeah, I would stop and I'd be like, was my stomach actually hurting? Is there a reason to think that maybe it wasn't hurting or was hurting? Am I misremembering this? I think that's a completely valid thing to do because we do make mistakes in this area.
Well, that seems like you're okay.
Only if
I
you
don't
had a
think we're
reason
getting
to.
anywhere with this.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Right.
Well,
Astrology is a scam. No.
but you should believe it if your personal experience validates it. That what you would
You
say?
should trust your personal experience. That's what I say.
Oh.
Okay, so if I imagine this girl, she got her prediction, and I'm gonna set her up in the best possible situation. Brand new astrology came out 2.0. It has actual predictions of personalities, and she managed to predict her boyfriend, her next boyfriend, and then she tested her dad and her brother and then her grandpa and then all of her closest friends, and all of them were correct. Like, a part of me says yes, she should start definitely trusting. There's some consistency there that she has a right to like believe in, I think.
But what if she's falling prey to confirmation bias and she's ignoring the problems with it and only noticing the places that it's working?
Well, that's not a good thing then.
But you can't get around confirmation bias if you wholly trust your personal experience. That's my point. I think.
Well, you can't get around confirmation bias. Period.
Well, you can try to minimize it by undermining
Yeah.
your personal experience.
With what? New experience that counters your previous experience?
Ah. Okay. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed this discussion on astrology and personal experience. I'm sure we'll touch on this again in the future.
Probably.
But let us know what you think. Let us know if you like astrology or hate it like we do. And thank you all for watching.